First, I would like to talk a little about Kees, that I met 2 years ago in the large World's Interior meeting in Amsterdam that Kees were organizing. And you all know Kees. If you don't, he is one of the very important persons within interior architecture, being an organization, leader, driver, hardworking person to keep this profession together all over the world. And but what was really nice for me was that it was not just nice personal meetings, but it was also to be inside his works. Because the interior meeting in Amsterdam was in the Berghe stock exchange building, and there was a glass box. And in the glass box there were lectures, and I still remember how we entered along the side with the glass box on the ramp. I was standing and looking in and waiting, if you were a little late to a lecture, waiting for the right moment to sneak in from behind. And then you were sitting in a glass box within the beautiful Berghe building and had all this double. You could see the structure and you could have a wonderful acoustics in a big brick hall where people were walking around and you didn't even hear them. So this was a magic spot. And then I realized when I prepared my introduction that it was built in 1991. And you said just now on the bench you had designed in the late 80s even. And even my wife and me, we were just being in New York where we saw the Apple store at Fifth Avenue, which is an iconic building, which is 25 years later. So we have a genuine avant-garde in Kees here today. I'm really looking forward to hear your lecture. What is interesting, wait a moment, because what is interesting about, what is interesting about the building is, I mean, this is maybe something about the vanity of architects is that nothing is forever. And you also told me that the building is dismantled. But you could see on the website that there was such a nice video saying, well, the owners of the stock exchange, they want to expand the conference facilities. It's simply too small, and we think it's so sad if they're just going to make scrap out of it. So we hereby offer concert hall to whoever want to have it. And you said in the video it's for free. Yesterday you said it was for €1. €1, yes. And it is actually being taken down to be erected somewhere else, which is really wonderful. So we have a problem about rooms where the functions are changing. It's simply too small. And I thought that was a nice introduction because you also quoted Winston Churchill. Then we were standing in the ruins of the House of Commons in 1941 in one of the large attacks from the Blitz, and it ruined the building. And then he was speculating what to do. And then he has this famous quote, because they were thinking about, should they actually repair all the shortcomings of the building? You know, the House of Commons is simply too small for the functions. I mean, at that time there were 615 members of parliament, and it could house about 475. So he was really thinking that it would be wonderful, because most of the time nobody's there. So it's actually good to have a small chamber. And when it's full, you had this sense of crowd and urgentness, because people were sitting on the aisles and standing and squeezing and so on, and that was this kind of festive atmosphere he wanted. So he said, and therefore he wanted to keep it, because he said we shape our buildings first, and then the buildings shape us. Let's have Kees to shape us now in this lecture.
Thank you, Morten, for your kind words and your introduction. Thank you to ESL and all the organizers, the hardworking people here, to invite me. And I must say, the motto of this meeting made it very interesting to take up your invitation and to talk about the impact of space. So when I was writing these quotes that you can read now in the little book that you have, I was thinking about setting up a more theoretical lecture on the impact of space and what space does to people and how we as placemakers have to react to that. And over the weekend, when I was actually putting together things changed a little bit in my mind because I'm a practitioner. I'm from real daily life practice. I'm not a theoretician myself, although I do read a lot about the subject and about interiors. So I decided to take another angle and look at it from the profession and what we do in everyday life. So it's a bit of a practical lecture that I want to give to you. But then over lunch we had this wonderful excursion this morning. It all seemed sort of not necessary anymore because we had this wonderful meeting this morning, and I won't tell much about it, but those who were there will admit that that really made us think about how we work and how we should research our work. So I want to talk about that, but before I start, I want to start with a small movie, if anything works.
The picnic near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early 1 October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now, every 10 seconds, we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider. This square is 10 meters wide, and in 10 seconds, the next square will be 10 times as wide. Our picture will center on the picnickers, even after they've been lost to sight. 100 meters wide. The distance a man can run in 10 seconds. Cars crowd the highway. Powerboats lie at their docks. The colorful bleachers are Soldiers Field. This square is 1 kilometer wide, 1,000 meters. The distance a racing car can travel in 10 seconds. We see the great city on the lake shore. 10 to the 4th meters, 10 kilometers. The distance a supersonic airplane can travel in 10 seconds. We see first the rounded end of Lake Michigan, then the whole Great Lake. 10 to the 5th meters. The distance an orbiting satellite covers in 10 seconds. Long parades of clouds, the day's weather in the Middle West. 10 to the 6th, a 1 with 6 zeros, 1 million meters. Soon the Earth will show as a solid sphere. We are able to see the whole Earth now, just over a minute along the journey. The Earth diminishes into the distance, but those background stars are so much farther away that they do not yet appear to move. A line extends at the true speed of light. In 1 second, it half crosses the tilted orbit of the moon. Now we mark a small part of the path in which the Earth moves about the sun. Now the orbital paths of the neighbor planets, Venus and Mars, then Mercury. Entering our field of view is the glowing center of our solar system, the sun, followed by the massive outer planets, swinging wide in their big orbits. That odd orbit belongs to Pluto. A fringe of a myriad comets too faint to see completes the solar system. Ten to the 14th. As the solar system shrinks to one bright point in the distance, our sun is plainly now only one among the stars. Looking back from here, we note 4 southern constellations, still much as they appear from the far side of the Earth. This square is 10 to the 16th meters, 1 light year, not yet out to the next star. Our last 10-second step took us 10 light years further. The next will be 100. Our perspective changes so much in each step now that even the background stars will appear to converge. At last, we pass the bright star Arcturus and some stars of the Dipper. Normal but quite unfamiliar stars and clouds of gas surround us as we traverse the Milky Way galaxy. Giant steps carry us into the outskirts of the galaxy. And as we pull away, we begin to see the great flat spiral facing us. The time and path we chose to leave Chicago has brought us out of the galaxy along a course nearly perpendicular to its disk. The 2 little satellite galaxies of our own are the clouds of Magellan. 10 to the 22nd power, 1 million light years. Groups of galaxies bring a new level of structure to the scene. Glowing points are no longer single stars, but whole galaxies of stars seen as one. We pass the big Virgo cluster of galaxies among many others, 100 million light years out. As we approach the limit of our vision, we pause to start back home. This lonely scene, the galaxies like dust, is what most of space looks like. This emptiness is normal. The richness of our own neighborhood is the exception. The trip back to the picnic on the lakefront will be a sped-up version, reducing the distance to the Earth's surface by 1 power of 10 every 2 seconds. In each 2 seconds, we will appear to cover 90% of the remaining distance back to Earth. Notice the alternation between great activity and relative inactivity, a rhythm that will continue all the way into our next goal, a proton in the nucleus of a carbon atom beneath the skin on the hand of the sleeping man at the picnic. Ten to the 9th meters, 10 to the 8th, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are back at our starting point. We slow up at 1 meter, 10 to the 0 power. Now we reduce the distance to our final destination by 90% every 10 seconds, each step much smaller than the one before. At 10 to the minus 2, 1/100th of a meter, 1 centimeter, we approach the surface of the hand. In a few seconds, we'll be entering the skin, crossing layer after layer from the outermost dead cells into a tiny blood vessel within. Skin layers vanish in turn. An outer layer of cells, felty collagen. The capillary containing red blood cells and a roughly lymphocyte. We enter the white cell. Among its vital organelles, the porous wall of the cell nucleus appears. The nucleus within holds the heredity of the man in the coiled coils of DNA. As we close in, we come to the double helix itself, a molecule like a long twisted ladder whose rungs of paired bases spell out twice, in an alphabet of 4 letters, the words of the powerful genetic message. At the atomic scale, the interplay of form and motion becomes more visible. We focus on one commonplace group of 3 hydrogen atoms bonded by electrical forces to a carbon atom. 4 electrons make up the outer shell of the carbon itself. They appear in quantum motion as a swarm of shimmering points. At 10 to the minus 10 meters, 1 angstrom, we find ourselves right among those outer electrons. Now we come upon the 2 inner electrons held in a tighter swarm. As we draw toward the atom's attracting center, we enter upon a vast inner space. At last, the carbon nucleus, so massive and so small. This carbon nucleus is made up of 6 protons and 6 neutrons. We are in the domain of universal modules. There are protons and neutrons in every nucleus, electrons in every atom, atoms bonded into every molecule out to the farthest galaxy. As a single proton fills our scene, we reach the edge of present understanding. Are these some quarks at intense interaction? Our journey has taken us through 40 powers of 10. If now the field is 1 unit, then when we saw many clusters of galaxies together, it was 10 to the 40th, or 1 and 40 zeros.
The infinity of space, the depth of the oceans, the wonders of nanotechnology. Space is endless, and mankind has always made efforts to capture it. Our attention as designers covers only a very small fragment of space, the space that we live and work in. Okay. And when we talk here about the impact of space, that is really a huge subject, but it's only a splinter of what space is. This was a film made by Charles and Ray Eames back in 1977 already. I wanted to show it here because it connects some of our greatest designers to spatial research in a much broader sense. Charles and Ray Eames have always been interested in the bigger picture. They were great observers. And no wonder they were great photographers and filmmakers too. This is the Ames House, as it was built in 1949. It's tempting to tell the whole story of the design of the house, but I won't do that. But what's important is that the design that was executed integrated the design into the landscape. Whereas the original design from 1945 rather imposed on it. This house is now owned by the Eames Foundation, which was set up by a daughter of the Eameses. And it's open to the public, although only by appointment, but if you're ever in California, do visit it because it's very interesting. And this foundation has the task to maintain, to preserve, and to restore this house. And in doing so, they sometimes run into unexpected problems. And that brings me to an interesting fact that reflects back to the movie that we just seen. Now, the wood paneling that you see on the right is a very important part of the design, of course, because it goes from the inside of the house to the outside, and it connects the house to the nature around it. Now, that wood paneling was severely deteriorated by time, and it needed treatment. And while much of the building process is very well documented because the Eameses used only prefabricated materials in that house, it turned out that nothing was known about this wood, what sort of wood it was, where the paneling came from. And people from museums always want to know where things come from, and they want to preserve things in the way that they are. So the first thing they needed to do was find out what sort of wood this was. So a small splinter of that wood was extracted from behind one of the electrical power outlets, and it was examined microscopically, and that delivers these magnificent pictures which refer to that movie that we've just seen. And that's, for me, that's a nice connection between thinking of space in this broader sense. In the end, it turned out that this was a species of eucalyptus. And that's a tree that's not native to California. It was imported from Tasmania and Australia. But for the researchers, it was something of a revelation, because just outside that house stands this stately row of eucalyptus trees. But it is known that they were already there before the house was built. In fact, the house was built between the trees or around the trees. So it is still unclear where this paneling came from, but it gives a nice insight in the Eames' way of thinking about connecting their architecture to nature. Anyway, the Eames left a footprint, but they were very much aware of it already in 1945, which can't be said from all of us. Suzie showed some similar pictures yesterday, which was very interesting. But you're designers, so I have one for you too. This is a project by a Korean artist called Yeong Mei-yoon. And this is where it all ends up, until nature takes over. But that's actually not what I wanted to talk about. So back to the Ames House. As I said, it's a wonderful house. And it's still an icon of modern design. And Googling on the internet to find the pictures for my lecture today, I Googled on contemporary interior design, and then you can find a picture like this, which is absolutely contemporary. But it hasn't changed much since 1949. So that brings me to the question, what is that thing? What is interior architecture? What is interior design? What do we understand with that name? Is this interior design? Is this interior architecture? Or is this architecture? Is this interior architecture? This is actually a newly built hotel in London. Or is this interior architecture? Or is it design? And is this design or is it an experience? So we have a very versatile profession. And I think to find the answer to what interior is, we have to go back to where it all started. Some 15,000 years ago, our basic need was to find shelter. And we found shelter in spaces like this. And we needed this shelter for the weather, for animals, for other people maybe. But look what we did. We started decorating. Now, at some point in time, we ran out of caves, probably because there were just too many of us. So we were clever and we invented building. We started making structures to give us shelter. And that's some 10,000 years later, that building became such an art that we even started building for the dead. And look what we did inside. We decorated. We built cities. And inside, we decorated. But anyway, building developed into architecture. And inside the architecture, we have always been decorating. And inspiration was never far away. In this interesting book, Home, A Short Story of an ID, the American architect and writer Witold Rybczynski describes the origin of the Western culture of living from the perspective of the interior. And as the cradle of what he calls a culture of domesticity, privacy and comfort, he sees the emerging of the Dutch middle class at the beginning of the 17th century. Now this is an important moment in time because before the Middle Ages, or before the 17th century, there were no middle class people, there was only upper class and lower class. And the Dutch started making this middle class, which was an important step. The start of the profession was dated by Rybczynski during the American Industrial Revolution at the end of the 19th century. From the arts and crafts movement, the design, but more specifically the efficiency of the interior, became an independent development within an architectural context, but with a typical design language and typical practitioners. In Europe, during this first half of the 20th century, interior design is still basically the work of architects, artists and craftsmen. In late Classicism, Art Deco and the modern movement, the interior is an integrated part of the architecture, but it's still basically an architectural development. Many of these movements were based upon a social ideology. Architects and artists wanted to position their work in a social context and add to the new consciousness of the people. Contrary to traditional, mostly religious or political ideas about public art, designers put a strong emphasis on the connection of different art forms, while at the same time a guild of furniture makers, like Rietveld in this case, and interior builders developed, who initially produced furniture and interiors, but gradually concentrated on consultancy and sales. But it was only after the Second World War that the interior architecture emerged as an independent profession. Europe was rebuilding after the ruins that the war had left, and architects were very busy with that task. And industrial designers took over the task of furniture design, which now became mass-produced. In between, interior designers worked on individual interiors for individual clients. So interior architecture is a rather young profession. And while the first generation of practitioners focused mainly on private clients, with an emphasis on residential and retail projects, the 1970s brought an array of media attention, driven by furniture wholesalers like IKEA and Terence Conran's Habitat. How do you say that? Habitat. Influenced by lifestyle magazines, interior design became fashionable and within everybody's reach, which led to a new democratic eclecticism. At the same time, furniture companies were taking over the commercial market with a one-stop shopping concept, which offered corporate clients not only chairs, tables, pens and pencils, but they also did the design of the office. At first, interior architects didn't have a convincing answer to these developments. At best they were not amused. But from the 1990s on, we see an exciting new emerging of the profession. Since the early 90s, life has changed. This guy got some machine on his desk. So life has changed globally and hence also in Europe. Computer technology and new communication systems gradually change the way we work, we communicate, and we do business. Society has become more and more transparent, and resources and opportunities became available for all. With the changing focus from building to user, and from long-term to short-term development, from these 1990s on, interior architects took a position at the forefront of office design. The use of buildings and cities became interchangeable in this cloud of technology that binds us together. We no longer work 5 days a week and 8 hours a day. The office is much more than a place to work nowadays. It develops into a social networking environment. We don't have fixed workplaces anymore, but an environment of atmospheres that relate to different types of concentration and communication. No rooms or cubicles, but a cafe, a lounge, meeting points, concentration rooms and leisure rooms. And even sport facilities, libraries, even a movie theater. All employees, from director to janitor, log into this wireless network and find the place that suits the activities of the day. This concept became a standard for new developments. People feel better and perform better in a congenial environment that supports the identity and the attitude of both the workers and the company. The office became the new home. Leaving this one person, one workplace concept also turned out to be profitable. Flex working generated a space saving of up to 30%. And of course it's tempting to see that profit as cost saving. But as soon as clients realize that the real profit is in the happiness and the employability of the people, it's clear that the gain has to be reinvested as a contribution to further development of the concept. Open offices require a different approach to comfort, to routing, to acoustics, to lighting, and to climate control. And interior architects are used to work with these aspects and to integrate utilities to human needs. The enormous technological developments and the ecological crisis that threatens us urges to search for such new office concepts. Why should well-educated, independent professionals suffer traffic congestion to go to an office while they can log into the network and do their task from virtually everywhere in the world? The added value of the office is that it is a place for communication, a place to share ideas, a place for development. A development that starts with the personal development of the office workers, who are the most valuable asset in a knowledge-based networking society. Emerging companies recognize that and want workplaces that are not only functional, but also appeal to the young people that fuel that company with their ideas. We need to create offices that are durable and flexible, capable to anticipate to changing work processes and contribute to the social climate of the city. Interior architects are actively working on this new task, and we found a new array of partners to collaborate with. Management consultants, strategy developers, facility managers, ET architects, and all that sort of consultants. Did I miss anybody here? Yes, I missed the traditional building developers and architects who still think that building more buildings is the answer to our future needs. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need new buildings anymore, but we need to build more innovatively and to use our buildings more intensively and intelligently. We need to reuse, redevelop, and rethink. And the keywords today are communication, transition, and reflection. There are keywords that we also find in education, in the way we pass on our knowledge to the next generation, and to help them become independent thinkers of themselves. Today, schools are complex structures where groups and individuals, pupils and teachers gather in an atmosphere of receptiveness. For a long time, creating such an atmosphere has been the domain of educators. But now we see that the interior design has a measurable effect on the way pupils feel and behave. And we saw that yesterday morning in one of the master theses. Here also, the interior architect turns out to be the partner to facilitate such environments. Because interior architects are used to think from a user's perspective and to not only functionally accommodate spatial needs, but to adapt to processes of communication and interaction. A similar effect we find in healing environments. Especially in the care industry, attention to the experiences and perception of the clients is crucial. After all, most people do not eagerly look forward to a doctor's visit or to hospitalization. Fear and menace color the contact between patient and health services. Fear for suffering, for handicap or death. Excellent medical care to the newest standards is of course a prerequisite, but patients also require attention for their personal questions and fears. They want a safe, comfortable environment, not an atmosphere that refers to illness, to technique, or to loss of dignity. A quiet and comfortable place for recuperation, not a medical production unit. An interior architect can create such a space in which a guest or a patient can feel at ease, in which the rhythm of life and time does not fade, but man can calm down, with room for dignity and self-respect. But care also has to be an efficient process. Medical care asks for a high quality of design, and the interior architect can join these seemingly incompatible requirements into a spatial concept that leaves room for atmosphere and emotion, and in which efficiency and clinical demands are incorporated optimally. In healthcare facilities, we want to avoid the monotony that often makes such spaces boring. For decades, beige and grey have been the colors of choice in hospitals. We all know the endless corridors and the crowded waiting rooms where all the patients are called at the same hour to wait for an available doctor. Today, we want to give clients a sense of identity. We speak of clients or residents instead of patients, and we respect privacy and human scale. In the new medical center, the patient is a guest. The hospital creates an atmosphere that ensures privacy and relaxation. Guests have to feel at home in an environment that equals a 4-star hotel, where family and friends can stay over and help to take care of the patient. Where medical conditions permit, and it proves that most patients they do, guests can use informal meeting facilities, relax rooms, and even workspaces, so they do not lose contact with their social context while they're being physically away from society. Healthcare is a fast-growing market due to the strong increase of the aging population. With that increase comes attention for nursing homes and homes for the elderly. In 2030, we expect 30% of the population to be older than 65, the result of increased prosperity and strongly improved healthcare. Today the percentage is 15, so that's a double. Luckily, these older people have a healthy life expectancy and a good social economic position, which allows for a relatively long social life. But elderly people are vulnerable, and for many of them comes a time that they need support and care. Having to leave your family surroundings is a radical change. And it's our duty to give those people a new home that at least matches the comfort and the familiarity that we are used to. Now, in those projects that I've just showed you, interior architecture goes way beyond the concept of space and decoration where I started with. These are designs that are rooted in knowledge. While decoration is still an important part of the work, the true strength lies in the creation of spaces that enhance and empower the people. And of course, deliberately, I showed office spaces, healthcare spaces, education and care projects. But of course also in other sectors like hospitality, retail, and to a certain extent even in residential projects, it goes that placemaking today is much more than creating a nice decor. That requires different skills from interior architects and designers. These are complex assignments in which we work together with multiple other consultants, as I just stated. And in such a multidisciplinary approach, it is often difficult to see where the work of one professional ends and that of the other starts. And that too makes it difficult for the outside world to see the significance or the added value of what we do as interior designers. To change that view, we shall have to invest even more in the quality of our education. And research and development must become an integrated part of our everyday proceedings. In conferences like this, here today, we will share and deepen our knowledge. And by all means, we must gather much more knowledge based on practical experience. By now, the instruments to do that are on hand. The bachelor-master system made scientific research a compulsory part of the training. And in some countries, we see even PhD programs emerging. The bookshelf with interior architecture books, which a decade ago was mainly filled with picture books, is slowly sagging under the weight of gathered knowledge. And Graeme yesterday showed a nice part of that. But it's by far not enough yet. Especially in daily practice, we do not see much adoption of evidence-based design. We don't do post-occupancy, that's a difficult word, post-occupancy evaluations. And the interface of our profession with environmental psychology, with neuroscience, and with behavioral economics is very, very rarely visible. For that, we shall have to change the way we work from a linear process focused on result into a circular process in which we constantly research whether what we have done works and incorporate the results of that research in new assignments. For our clients, the result of our work has always been the beginning of the journey. Now we shall have to convince them that, from now on, we join them on the trip, to learn, to adjust where needed, and to change where necessary. We will become the consultant who is not only concerned with accommodation, but also thinks along in productivity, in effectiveness of processes, and in happiness in life. Rather than creating spaces that will be remembered, placemaking is a dynamic process. More than 2,000 years ago, Vitruvius formulated his famous doctrine of architecture, firmitas, utilitas, venustas. And Per already showed it yesterday. But he was a bit free in the translation. I think the proper translation is solid, useful, and beautiful. But maybe it's time that we reformulate that, and I want to pose that here to start a discussion today. I think we should at least formulate a trial that qualifies interior space. So, Per's translation, I want to suggest here beauty, comfort, and sustainability. What do we think of that? Would that be something to start a discussion here? I want to leave it with that and ask you all to see what we think of this idea. Morten? Thank you.
Thank you, Kees, for a good beginning for a conversation. We have time to go on with the conversation. We started a little late, so we can also push the time in the end. So that was a proposal, beauty, comfort, sustainability. But you also had another one before, which said that we have to follow the entire process.
Yeah.
Where you're advocating for an evidence-based design, where we should also follow up and not forget that when we deliver our spaces, we should research in them.
Well, we should research what we do and take more, not just, we were talking yesterday here about the academic approach and about not speaking too academic. Academic and theoretical research is very good, of course, but we also have to research what we do in everyday practice. And again, this morning we saw a wonderful example of how things can go terribly wrong if we do not do our homework. So research should really be a part of our everyday practice. And some of the projects that I have shown, none of the work I've shown is my work. I didn't show anything from my own practice. But some of the projects that I've shown, for instance, the hospital design with this man lying in this bed, it's designed by DDoc, an Amsterdam-based office. And they have a psychologist in their staff. So they work on a different level. We see it happen on a small scale. Anja, who is here in the house, did a wonderful research project on aging people and you know how do you call it? Dementia. I was looking for the English word, dementia. And she's incorporated that in her practice, in her everyday work. And not only is that good for herself and her practice because she gets work out of it, but it lifts the whole profession. So I think that sort of research should be done much more.
I was thinking about if that was actually the sustainable path. That if we go out and evaluate, and if you go around here, Kees,
yeah,
I think that that our good organizers are suggesting that down here, impact of space.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, what it's all about. That I thought that was really very, very good because the way you showed your spaces, they were full of people.
Yeah.
They were actually the spaces in action and not just...
But we also have to realize that the impact of space, we are not designing for eternity. Things change. You just talked about the glass hall that I designed 25 years ago. It's now demolished because it's not needed anymore. There's nothing so changing so fast as architecture. But architecture itself is quite stable. It's the interiors that change. And that's where we come in.
And with the interiors that changes, we changes also.
Absolutely.
Could you find some examples of spaces that actually made us think, act, engage differently? Because it's also maybe something like that a good space suggests us to maybe act with a little more sustainable perspective, get good ideas.
I think sustainability should not be seen anymore as a specific quality of design. It should be incorporated in everything that we design. It should be in our minds. It should be under our skin. That's one thing. The other thing is that the best designs are invisible designs. The best designs are those designs that you don't see but are there. You can feel them. You start missing them if they are not around anymore. So design is never something that's made to be on the forefront, in my opinion. Design is, what I say, you shouldn't see it.
I was thinking about when you showed retirement homes. They were looking like clubs, hotels, and you used the term 4-star hotels for your hospitals. The impact such places has on people and people's behavior.
Yeah, it's our task as architects to lift people a little bit and to make them happy. Yes. And if they are happy, they function better, they heal better. Everything goes better if you feel good. Mm-hmm. So making people feel good is the basis of our work.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that many of these spaces, they were extremely efficient. If you counted how many people who are sitting per square meter in your retirement home, when you talked about the school buildings, you had the Delft School of Architecture with a big auditorium. They are bragging a lot about the space efficiency, and you talked about large room office buildings where you could reduce the need for square meters to up to 30%.
Exactly.
And how you reinvested it in.
And that's where this research comes in and turns out to be so important, because we need to know what we are doing. for whom we are working, for whom we are designing, and we really have to go in under the skin of the user. So back to this movie, we have to go under the skin of the people that we are working for.
Yes. But maybe that's also one of the best parts of sustainability. If we could squeeze our square meters together. Maybe a reduction of square meters is a reduction of the heating bill, it's a reduction of material bill.
It absolutely helps, and as one of the people who showed us around this morning said, you need all buildings for new ideas.
That's right. Correct. It would be good to hear if there anybody in the auditorium who would like to comment a little. It's heavy. Is it? Yes.
You can take it off.
It's not a question, it's just a note of caution. Maybe I'm slightly anxious that we keep making distinctions between academics, practice, etc., etc. We all practice academia, we all are academics about practice. Let's not fall into the trap of making these distinctions, because that could be a conversation which could take us as a group, as a discipline somewhere, which is not necessary. So we're all researchers, we're all researching practice, we're all practicing research. It's a false dichotomy saying your work and your talk is very much about research, about ideas, about finding.
And that's where we can find each other. I'm not trying to separate, I'm just trying to bring it together.
I was just worried that